Thank you very much for coming, and without further ado, let's begin. Hello, I'm Lætitia Avrot. I fell in love with Postgres in 2007 when I was asked to write an extension for Postgres able to find a French tone name, even if it was misspelled. If you studied a little French, you will understand how difficult it is. I have several hats, as I'm a committed Postgres community member. I'm the treasurer of PostgreSQL Europe, the founder of Postgres Women, and a recognized Postgres contributor. I'm also a practice leader working for EDB, meaning I'm the technical point of knowledge for anything relating to Postgres or security of Postgres at EDB. And finally, I'm a university teacher teaching Postgres and databases at the University of Lyon.
And I'm Karen Jex. I started my tech career 25 years ago. For most of that time, I was a database administrator, and then I became a database consultant, and I'm now a senior solutions architect at Crunchy Data. I'm also vice treasurer of the PostgreSQL Europe board with Lætitia. And I'm a woman. I don't usually include that bit when I introduce myself because I don't think it's particularly relevant to the work I do or to the talks I give. But this one's a bit different. And don't mind the blonde guy, he's just Ken.
We're here to talk about what it's like for women in tech. But before we begin, I'd like to make a little disclaimer. This is a sociology talk. In sociology, it's enough if it's true for the majority of cases to make it a truth, because it's based on statistics. So if you happen to think, but I'm not like that, and it will happen because we are all human beings here, remember it's about statistics. Also, we will talk about the IT world because that's the one we know, but it is not the worst domain where sexism happens.
Taking inspiration from Barbie, the most popular movie of 2023, we unravel the challenging journey of women navigating the male-dominated tech world.
We'll share real-life examples of gender bias and sometimes overt sexism, although names have been changed to protect identities, giving insights into the persistent hurdles that women encounter.
We hope to create awareness, encourage reflection, and inspire action to create a more inclusive and equitable IT landscape for everyone.
Join us for an eye-opening exploration that paves the way for meaningful change in Ken's Mojo Dojo Casa house.
Much as it's fun to dress up and do something a little bit different, I'd actually be much more comfortable up here giving a tech talk. So why are we doing this?
Well, the Barbie movie was eye-opening to me. I didn't learn anything about patriarchy or feminism in this film. Those notions are quite obvious to me. But I saw that the vast majority of the population was not aware of that. I've seen a lot of talks about the lack of women in IT and trying to explain why. The Barbie movie made me realize that we had to explain what women are facing on a day-to-day basis so others can understand how tiresome it can be.
Life's hard as a woman in tech. I've been in the industry for 25 years, and I absolutely love the work I do. I can't imagine doing anything else. But I'm exhausted, and I'm angry, and I'm sad that I haven't been able to do more for the women that are still fortunately coming in behind me. I still often feel like an outsider after all this time. Conference lineups still in 2023, 2024 with all white male presenters don't do anything to help that. It doesn't make me feel welcome in the only industry I've ever known and the only career I've ever wanted to pursue. And just a note to the event that felt the need to invent 2 female speakers to give the impression of a more diverse lineup, no, that really doesn't help.
Women are underrepresented in tech. In 2022, women occupied only 22% of all tech roles across European companies. This is even more evident in certain areas of tech, for example, in open source projects such as Postgres. Of the 96 people listed as contributors to the project, only 4 are women. Of the 41 major contributors, only 2 are women. The core team is composed of 7 members, all white male. There has never been a woman in a core team, and new core team members are appointed by existing core team members.
Our very own Lætitia here is one of those contributors.
Don't make me blush.
There's a tech talent gap estimated to reach 1.4 million to 3.9 million people by 2027 for EU 27 countries, which could potentially be closed by doubling the share of women in the tech workforce.
But the share of women in the workforce is lowest in the tech roles that are growing fastest, such as DevOps and cloud, and over half of women leave the tech industry 10 to 20 years into their career, which is the double of the rate of men.
Which means that the share of women in the tech roles in Europe is actually heading towards a decline to 21% by 2027.
Women in tech experience gender bias or discrimination in the workplace. For example, reported by a staggering 76% of respondents to a 2023 Women in Tech survey. Let's try a bit of audience participation to illustrate the scale of the issue. If you're willing to share, please raise your hand if you've been one of those women who has experienced discrimination in the workplace. We're sorry you experienced that. We hear you. Thank you for sharing.
Women in tech are paid less than their male counterparts. In the UK, for example, the tech industry's gender pay gap is 16%, which is higher than the national average of 11.6%.
Diversity has been proven to be good for everyone. It enhances creativity, leads to better business decisions, and even increases productivity and profitability. Why did we decide to take the talk to base the talk on the Barbie movie?
Well, Barbie is an unlikely ally. But when the film came out last year, it seemed to resonate with so many women.
There might not be anything new or groundbreaking in the actual message, but the film says out loud what so many of us think and feel and presents it to the world in a fun, accessible way.
And we hope to do the same in this talk.
At the beginning of the film, we are introduced to stereotypical Barbie, played by Margot Robbie, and her fellow dolls who are living happily in Barbieland.
In this matriarchal society, the different Barbies hold prestigious jobs such as doctor, lawyer, and politician, while the Kens do beach.
The Barbies live blissfully in a bubble where the problems encountered by women in the real world just don't exist.
Some girls are fortunate enough to be brought up hearing the message that they can do anything they want and be anything they want.
In fact, according to standardized science and math tests conducted at different age levels across multiple European countries, girls perform as well as or slightly better than boys in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math subjects during primary and secondary education.
Alice, one of the women who shared their stories with us, told us that she went to a progressive all-girls school where they were told constantly that girls can do anything, but that it was a shock to the system when she realised later that things weren't always so simple.
Things aren't idyllic for all of the Barbies. With Barbie, weird Barbie, for example, is a Barbie who was played a little too roughly. She lives in her weird dream house and is treated as an outcast by other Barbies.
It's an uncomfortable truth that women aren't always kind to other women. We expect that women who become successful in tech will want to offer help, support, and guidance to younger women colleagues, and that they'll want to challenge the status quo to make things easier and better. And unfortunately, that isn't always the case.
All of us, even women, are sexist because we are raised in a sexist world. The Harvard University implicit bias tests are a good way to become aware of our own unconscious bias. The results can be quite surprising. We may think we don't subscribe to the gender stereotypes, but we find out that we, like many people, associate males more with science and career and females more with liberal arts and family.
There's a behaviour known as the queen bee phenomenon, where women leaders assimilate into male-dominated organisations by distancing themselves from junior women and legitimising gender inequality in their organisations. This is explained as a response to the discrimination and social identity threat that women may experience in male-dominated organisations, and is not a typically feminine response, but part of a general self-group distancing response that's also found in other marginalised groups.
In less academic terms, think mean girls. We obviously need women to support other women. A great sentiment here is, you can't compete with me, I want you to win too.
Although this talk is specifically about what it's like to be a woman in tech, and a lot of the experience we describe are universal to all women, it's really important for us to acknowledge that we're speaking from a position of privilege.
Women who also belong to other underrepresented or oppressed groups, for example, women with disabilities or women of color, can face discrimination related to each of these identities and therefore will often face additional struggles.
Also, although we mainly use the words women and men in this talk, we're aware that these issues also impact people with other gender identities. This fight has to be for all of us.
So I will take off this because this is the right slide to do that. And now my feet are free. One evening, whilst dancing with her friends as usual, Barbie suddenly experiences thoughts about mortality. Overnight, she develops bad breath, cellulite, and flat feet, making her day slightly less than perfect for the first time ever.
She turns to Weird Barbie for advice, who tells her that to fix things, she needs to go to the real world and find the girl playing with her.
Barbie sets off on the long journey in her convertible, only to find that Ken had stowed away and insists on joining her. Barbie initially says no, but eventually agrees.
That's surely a metaphor for women feeling unable to set boundaries and to say no in the workplace.
Instead of leaving Babylon to head to the real world, girls are turning their back on STEM subjects, and women are leaving their tech roles in droves.
Despite the fact that girls perform as well as boys in STEM subjects at school, there's a significant drop-off, 18 percentage points, in girls going into STEM disciplines when they go on to university.
The drop is even higher, 21 percentage points, when you take into account just ICT, information science, computer science, and technology disciplines.
There's also a small but steady decline in women's STEM graduates over time, 1 to 2 percentage points from 2016 to 2020. Some of the reasons for this drop-off.
Secondary school girls get significant less teacher, parental, and peer support than boys to do for pursuing STEM careers.
Girls are told that they aren't good at STEM, often communicated in subtle but debilitating ways, such as teachers in STEM classes calling on boys more than girls.
With only 19% of ICT bachelor students being women, the resulting isolation is often another reason women drop out of these classes.
And there's a second dispiriting and significant drop-off in the percentage of women who transition into tech roles after graduation. Only 23% of women STEM majors end up in tech roles, compared to 44% of men.
Although not the focus of this talk, we also have to acknowledge that there are critical basic needs that prevent girls from achieving educational goals in many countries around the world. Many adolescent girls do not attend school during menstruation, for example, because of lack of adequate sanitation, cultural taboo, stigma, or access to pain medication. One of my friends, Ulimatu, in Conakry, Guinea, experienced a drop in the proportion of girls in her school from 30% to just less than 20% between 6th and 7th grades. This was due to them getting married during the summer of their 12th birthday. According to a 2022 Women in Tech article, over half of women, 56%, leave tech industry 10 to 20 years into their career, which is the double of the rate of men. Some of the reasons that women are leaving their tech roles are
few opportunities for progression or the glass ceiling. In the UK, for example, women hold 32.8% of entry-level positions in computer science-related jobs, just 22% of tech director positions, and only 10.9% of CEO or senior leadership roles. However, as many as 68% of men in tech believe women have equal progression opportunities, and 35% of men believe that there are already enough women in senior positions in technology. This may, of course, be contributing to the issue. If men are unaware that there's a problem, then they don't see that there's anything to fix. A 2021 Harvard Business Review article describes how feedback provided to women tends to be less actionable and less useful for leadership progression than feedback given to men, making it less likely that women advance to more senior positions.
Imposter syndrome, or preparing to fail, or what I call the glass cliff. Imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern that causes chronic self-doubt and overwhelming feelings of inadequacy, often despite repeated successes and accomplishments. A report by the HubSpot showed a shocking 90% of women suffer from imposter syndrome. This can be particularly prominent for women in tech. One outcome of this is that tech workers overwork themselves due to competition and demanding workload.
A lack of certain employee benefits can also be a huge reason some women choose to leave the tech industry. This can be so that they choose to leave their company, and it's especially the case in the tech industry, as the majority of those in the industry are men, and so might not understand or appreciate why certain benefits might be necessary for women. Things like flexible working, remote working, maternity leave, and pregnancy loss policies can be particularly important employee benefits for women. Flexible or remote working can be useful for multiple reasons. For example, if they're going through menstruation or menopause, they may be more comfortable working from home, or if they're suffering badly, they could take time off when they're feeling worse and then make up time later when the symptoms are better.
It is not surprising that the company culture in a lot of tech companies is very male-dominated. Women can feel on the outside of work due to their work environment being mostly men.
There are a few experiences that stick in my mind related to this, but one in particular was when I was the only woman on the team during a team-building exercise, an escape game. We worked together to solve the puzzle, and everything seemed to be going well. But when it came time for the group photos, one of my colleagues found an adult magazine and thought it'd be fun to open it at a particularly explicit page and include it in the group photo. None of the others said anything, and all I could think of to say at the time was, "Really?" And I didn't mention it to anybody afterwards because I had no idea what to say and whether or not anyone would even take it seriously. Christy tells us,
I was once asked during a job interview if I was in the process of losing or gaining weight, and asked to pose for a photo which the hiring manager showed to other male members of the team to make sure I was pretty enough to join.
if you're willing to share, could you raise your hand if you've had an experience that made you uncomfortable because of the male-dominated culture in a company you've worked for? Keep your hand up if it's happened more than once. More than 5 times? So many times you've lost count? Thank you for sharing.
The lack of female role models or mentors. The longer it takes to increase the number of women in tech-related jobs, the longer it will take for there to be a significant amount of female role models for the younger generations to look up to and have the desire to follow in their footsteps. Role models are important as they can be a powerful force for social learning and can help influence their decisions. They also play a large role in motivating people to achieve their goals as they can see that it is possible.
low pay, or the gender pay gap? As we saw in the UK, the tech industry's gender pay gap is 16%, which is even higher than the national average. In particular, recent studies have shown that the largest gender pay gap in tech is actually in early careers, with women under 25 earning on average 29% less than males their age. Arriving at Venice Beach, Barbie starts to feel uncomfortable as she notices men staring at her. She punches a man for groping her, leading to her and Ken's brief arrest.
Mattel's CEO is alerted by Barbie and Ken's presence and orders their recapture.
Barbie tracks down her owner, a tween girl named Sasha, who criticizes her for encouraging unrealistic beauty standards. You've been making women feel bad about themselves since you were invented.
Barbie is shocked to realize that she didn't actually change the world through inspiring women to do anything, and to find out that, unlike Barbieland, women don't run the real world. Unfortunately, as women out there here in the real world, we are all too aware of that.
I've lost count of the number of times I've been spoken over in meetings, and I'm not alone in this. Many respondents to the 2023 Women in Tech survey reported feeling overlooked or interrupted by the men in their company.
One said, "I am the only female manager in my company's management meetings, yet I am frequently spoken over, cut off, or not given the time to raise my concerns. Myself, I heard at least twice in my career, we tried hiring a woman and she was not good, so we won't hire a woman again."
20 years into my career as a DBA, my role on a project was database expert, not a title I gave myself. Despite that, and the fact that I was constantly given glowing reviews for my work, a male colleague from a different project was called into a meeting by the male project manager because they needed some database expertise.
As a database expert, I know some things. If I don't know, I simply say it and look for the answer. I had a project manager who, each time I said something about databases, called a colleague to double check. Of course, in front of me. The colleague was embarrassed because he was less qualified than myself and he knew it.
Barbie discovers that it was actually Sasha's mother, Gloria, a Mattel employee who has inadvertently caused her existential crisis. Gloria was playing with Sasha's old Barbie toys whilst upset about her strained relationship with her daughter, and began designing new dolls such as Irrepressible Thoughts of Death Barbie and Crippling Shame Barbie. It was these thoughts that found their way into Barbieland.
As we saw, a huge majority of women suffer from imposter syndrome, and this can be particularly prominent for women in tech. And we shouldn't blame them for experiencing imposter syndrome.
A 2022 BBC Work Life article discusses the links between imposter syndrome and a high risk of burnout, and research that indicates that ingrained biases and a lack of diversity can mean that underrepresented and ethnic minority groups are particularly affected.
Go back to the Barbie movie. The Mattel executives attempt to put Barbie in a toy box for remanufacturing, but she escapes with Gloria and Sasha's help, and they travel to Barbieland with the Mattel executives in pursuit.
Of course, putting Barbie literally in a box to put her back in what the Mattel executives thought was her rightful place is a very clear metaphor for women being put in the box demanded of them by society.
Even where girls and women aren't subjected to actual discrimination, they are continually bombarded by unhelpful gender stereotypes. We'd be here all day if we tried to cover all examples of this, so let's stick to a couple that are specifically careers related.
This is a careers special that my kids were sent a few years ago now as part of their Petit Quotidien children's newspaper subscription. Just on the front page, we see a female dressmaker, a male fighter pilot, and a movie set where 10 out of 11 roles are illustrated as men. As you can imagine, it doesn't improve as you go through. And this is actually still on sale, educating our children. A few years ago, I was excited to hear that the BBC was airing a couple of episodes of a programme called Girls Can Code. as part of their Make It Digital season. What I wasn't expecting was to end up shouting in frustration at the television because A, there was actually no coding involved, and B, they chose things like jewellery, fashion and makeup to show why tech could be exciting for girls.
One way in which women are frequently stereotyped is by being assumed to be responsible for the majority of childcare. I was constantly asked about my family and family plans during job interviews, even though it is totally illegal. Questions were very direct, like, do you have children? How many? More than that, my engineering school trained me to have the correct answer to family plans questions.
I was lucky enough to only be asked once in a job interview in my 20s, if or when I was planning on starting a family. On the other hand, I was often asked things like, who's looking after the children when I was away on work trips?
Meanwhile, during Barbie's capture and escape, Ken discovers the patriarchy and feels respected and powerful for the first time. People suddenly call him Sir and ask for his advice or help.
When Ken learns that he can't just walk his way into a job as a banker or doctor without any qualifications, he decides that if he can't participate in the patriarchy in the real world, he'll bring the philosophy back to Barbieland.
Back in Barbieland, he redecorates Barbie's dream house into what he dubs his Mojo Dojo Casa house, and he persuades the other Kens to take over and turn Barbieland into his Kendom.
The Barbies are indoctrinated into submissive roles, such as agreeable girlfriends, housewives, and maids. Barbie arrives home and is horrified. She tries and fails to convince everyone to return to the way things were and becomes depressed.
Unfortunately, women in tech often experience sexism in the workplace. I was once hired to a company that was particularly toxic. They had noticed something was wrong and decided out of the blue that adding a woman to the team would smooth things up. Guess what? Didn't work. In this company, interns went very often to ask me questions. It was very basic questions, but as a database expert, I took the time to answer all of them, until a colleague told me to stop because the interns were actually trying to test my skills. Gloria's frustrating monologue about society's conflicting expectation of women raised cheers in cinemas around the world.
It is literally impossible to be a woman. You're so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like we always have to be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong.
You have to be thin, but not too thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass.
You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time.
You have to be a career woman, but also always be looking out for other people.
You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women because you're supposed to be a part of the sisterhood.
But always stand out and always be grateful. But never forget that the system is rigged, so find a way to acknowledge that, but also always be grateful.
You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard, it's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you.
And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault.
I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. In our tech roles, we often don't feel good enough, so we work harder, take on more responsibility, volunteer more, and end up burning out and being seen as weak or too emotional. Gloria's speech restores Barbie's self-confidence, and with the assistance of Sasha, Weird Barbie, Alan, and the discontinued dolls, Gloria's speech deprograms the Barbies from their indoctrination.
We all, whatever our gender, need to unlearn or internalize sexism and stereotypes ideas. We can start by being aware of it, for example, by taking the implicit bias tests mentioned earlier, and by challenging ourselves on it whenever we notice it.
And there are things we can do as women to help reprogram ourselves. One example is to avoid taking on too much and becoming overwhelmed. I only recently learned about the 4 Ds of time management, and I think this is a great mantra. Delete, delegate, delay. Delete tasks that won't help you to achieve your goals. Delegate tasks that can be handled by someone else. Delay or defer important tasks that aren't urgent. And finally, the 4th D, actually do the urgent and important tasks on your list.
In one, if my women on my Women on IT group, we created a punch card for each member, so that when they reached 10 times they said no in the workplace, they were entitled to cheers and an ice cream. Let's help each other to reduce our workload here and now. You can either just have a think and make a mental note. What's something on your to-do list that can be deleted? How about something that can be delegated to someone else? What's one thing that you can delay because it's not as urgent or important as other things on your list? Fortunately, Kens easily distracted by acting out war games with the other Kens. So the Barbies are able to prevent the boys from enshrining male superiority into Babylon's constitution, and they can take back Babylon.
There are some things that we can do to help women to gain power.
Oh, that's me. Allyship. The Cambridge Dictionary defines allyship as the quality or practice of helping or supporting other people who are part of a group that is treated badly or unfairly, although you are not yourself a member of this group. It goes on to say that allyship means using your power, position, or privilege to uplift others. Men in leadership positions can show allyship by advocating for gender equity or for a particular woman colleague.
Mentorship. Both male and female mentors can help empower women in their careers.
Advocacy. Allies can use their voice to make sure women are heard. For example, advocating for Karen in a meeting by saying something like, "Karen had a great idea about that, she said."
Amplification goes one better. An ally could encourage others to listen to the only woman in a meeting, for example, by saying something like, "I'd love to hear what Sonia had to say about that."
Barbie and Ken apologize to each other, acknowledging their mistakes. Barbie encourages Ken to find his own sense of purpose and identity without Barbie to be enough.
Having now experienced systemic oppression for themselves, the Barbies resolve to rectify the faults of their previous society, emphasizing better treatment of the Kens and all outcasts.
Still, when the Kens ask to be part of the Supreme Court, the Barbies says no, but they can have a smaller leadership role. This is a historical message that women have been told.
Although we still have a long way to go in our imperfect real world, things are gradually changing. Not so many years ago, pretty much all of the faces returned by a Google image search for software developer were men. When I did a similar search recently, 7 out of the first 24 faces, almost 30%, appear to be women.
There are some good initiatives in the Postgres community aimed at increasing diversity and inclusion.
There's a PostgreSQL Code of Conduct and Code of Conduct committee. And there are 3 women on the Code of Conduct committee, including the chair.
The US PostgreSQL Association has a diversity committee with a mission to promote an inclusive environment in the PostgreSQL community through outreach program and the support of educational endeavor for underrepresented PostgreSQL users in the United States.
Some PostgreSQL conferences, for example PG Day Paris and others now, work to encourage as many women as possible to submit talks and to be a part of the organization and talk selection process. The 2023 PG Day Paris organization team, for example, was all women, and the speaker lineup was 50% women. Other conferences, for example, PGConf EU, have made childcare available to encourage inclusivity.
Postgres Women is a group without any legal existence that aims at encouraging and supporting women to become active members of the PostgreSQL community and fostering recognition of their contribution to PostgreSQL.
The number of women speaking at PostgreSQL conferences has increased significantly over the past 10 years. To create this chart, I looked at information available on the websites of the various different PostgreSQL community conferences across Europe. I've tried to identify the number of women speakers based either on my knowledge of the speakers or best guess of gender, since we don't actually ask speakers or participants to share their gender or other information that would help us to track this and to see how well we're doing in terms of representation.
Other tech communities have educational programs aimed at encouraging girls and women to pursue careers in tech. A good example is Jungle Girls. Jungle Girls is a non-profit organization and a community that empowers and helps women to organize free one-day programming workshops by providing tools, resources, and support.
Unfortunately, some programs, although well-meaning, still don't get it right. Isabelle Collet, a professor at the University of Geneva, recently shared that she was invited to speak about girls in tech at an event in Paris. She noted that of the 5 people in the illustration advertising the event, 4, including the instructor, are depicted as white males. A black girl appears to have been added as an afterthought, partially cut off the image.
Gloria wants to see an ordinary Barbie, a Barbie that reflects the everyday struggles of women. Ordinary Barbie isn't the president or an astronaut or a supermodel. She just wants a flattering top and to get through the day feeling kind of good about herself.
The message that girls and women can do anything and be anything is supposed to be empowering, but it causes so many of us to believe that we should always be aspiring to great things and that we need to do everything.
I want normal role models. It's too difficult to identify with a genius like Marie Curie, for example. Let's embrace being good enough and getting through the day feeling kind of good about ourselves. I've often said I'd like to work with more mediocre women.
Of course, we don't necessarily aspire to having mediocre colleagues, but it would be nice if our fellow women in tech didn't always feel the need to excel, to shine, to stand out. It would be amazing if they felt that we could just quietly get on with being ordinary. Obviously, Barbie's a Hollywood movie, so there's the usually schmaltzy everything turned out perfectly ending. Barbie, still unsure of her own identity, meets with the spirit of Ruth Handler, Mattel co-founder and creator of the Barbie doll, who explains that Barbie's story has no set ending.
Barbie decides she wants to become human and return to the real world, saying, I want to be part of the people that makes meaning, not the thing that is made. The Barbies, Kens, and Mattel executives all wave her off and wish her well.
How can we forge our own Hollywood ending? The authors of Women in Tech, The Best Bet to Solve Europe's Talent Shortage, acknowledge that the level of representation of women in tech, is a tough problem to solve. However, although there are no silver bullets, 4 interventions: addressing bias in the workforce, improving retention rates, reskilling women into tech roles, and boosting girls in STEM classes earlier in their educational process, can have a significant impact.
Even if we don't have all the answers, now that you're aware of some of the reasons that women turn their back on STEM subjects, and some of the reasons that women are leaving their tech roles, we can all make sure that we have conversations about those things and start finding ways to remove some of those barriers. So, what can we do to prevent girls turning their back on STEM subjects?
Well, we can give girls more support for pursuing STEM careers. Even if you're not a parent or teacher, there are things that you can do to support and encourage girls who are interested in pursuing tech careers. Maybe you could create or support an organization that encourages girls to consider a tech career. I've very much enjoyed helping Rights Tech Women, an organization based in Geneva, to run robotics or coding workshops for girls.
Girls are told that they aren't good at STEM. I hope that teachers will gradually become aware of and work to change their implicit bias. If we want girls to consider careers in tech, we need them to believe in their abilities in STEM subjects.
We need to prevent women ICT students from feeling isolated. Building a sense of community, a sisterhood, through initiatives such as Women in Technology groups could reduce feelings of isolation for women ICT students and help them to feel supported, included, and safe. So what can we do to prevent women from leaving their tech roles?
Well, We saw that many men believe there are already enough women in senior positions in technology, even though women are still very much in the minority of this role. Raising awareness that there's a problem will mean that people are more inclined to find a way to fix it. The author of the 2021 Harvard Business Review article mentioned earlier offers strategies for managers to overcome their own, often unconscious, gender bias and help both their male and female reports achieve their leadership potential.
Workers who are provided with regular positive and helpful feedback on performance, who feel able to discuss their challenges in an open environment, and who have ready access to coaching and mentoring, may find that imposter syndrome's lessened.
Organizations that offer benefits such as flexible working, remote working, maternity leave, and pregnancy loss policies may find themselves more able to retain their workforce. Having a diverse group of people discussing benefits may help with understanding which benefits are particularly impactful for women.
Being aware that the company culture in a lot of tech companies is very male-dominated and making an effort to make women feel welcome, comfortable, and included can go a long way.
Female role models are important, especially for younger generations to aspire to. We can all take the time to share the accomplishments of the many amazing women in tech and to amplify their voices to make them more visible. As women in tech, we can offer our services as mentors to encourage others to follow in our footsteps. We can encourage more women to speak at conferences and encourage conference organizers to challenge their own unconscious gender bias when selecting a lineup so that more women are on the stage sharing their experiences and expertise.
The gender pay gap is a complex subject and not one that we're going to fix quickly. But let's at least encourage open discussions around salary so that people are aware of the difference and know that there's a problem to fix. Careers coaches or agents could also be a useful tool for women to help them know and to believe in their own worth and to identify and achieve their career and salary goals. Things aren't always easy for women in Ken's Mojo Dojo Casa house. We've seen
women are underrepresented in tech. Women leave the tech industry. Women in tech experience gender bias or discrimination in the workplace. Women in tech are paid less than their male counterparts.
Maybe we can't aspire to every day being the best day ever, but there are things that we can do to help make the tech landscape a bit better every day for women and for all of us. Thanks.
So this talk is very sourced. So you see we have a lot of references because we are data people. So there are facts. And if you'd like to take the implicit bias test, here is a QR code with a URL giving you access to it. Thank you. And for the end of this talk, we'd like all women in this room to follow us to have a group photo under this slide. Bah, je vais pas remettre les talons.
Ah ouais. Faut qu'on demande à quelqu'un de prendre le photo, par
Oui.
contre. Oui.
Bah, tu m'enverras la photo.
Ça marche. Ah, je te...
Non. J'ai une robe de Barbie en plus, s'ils veulent. Je suis devant toi. Il y a plein de places devant.
Ouais. Venez, venez, venez.
Venez. Là, on ne vous voit pas. Voilà. Il y a Karine.
Oh,
non, on ne sépare pas les Barbies. Mettez au milieu, vas-y, c'est bon. Merci.